British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in Washington for talks with President Joe Biden that will include Ukraine's request to use Western-supplied weapons against targets inside Russia. Starmer said on his way to U.S. that Britain does not seek any conflict with Russia. Reports have suggested that he will ask Biden to give his blessing to Ukraine's use of UK and French-made Storm Shadow missiles, whose range is long enough to hit Russia. And for more on this, let's bring in Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye, who has been monitoring developments from London. Good to see you, Lape. Now, let's talk about the accreditation of 6 British diplomats in Moscow that's now been revoked by Russia's FSB security service. Do you see this as a revenge tactics on the part of Russia?
Well, that's certainly what the British government is saying. They've described this allegation as baseless. In fact, they've gone as far as calling it a tit-for-tat action from Russia, considering that the British also expelled Russian diplomats a while ago following the escalation in the war in Ukraine. This, of course, has come as a result of the accusations from Russia stating that there have been spying activities going on from British diplomats who are, of course, based in Russia. This is not the first time that we've seen retaliatory action from the Russian government, but this time around, of course, they've been named and shamed, if you like, in Russian state TV, as well as the FSB, like you rightly pointed out, the security secret services have also gone as far as saying that actually this is an escalation in the war in Ukraine. In fact, President Putin has promised, in his own words, that if it is that the British government, as well as the US, is supplying Ukraine, who have been clamoring for these missiles for the longest time, if they are supplying them these weapons, then this is now going to be a full-blown war with not just Ukraine, but also the West at large.
Well, that would be a very serious turn of events. But what would the UK be doing? What measures would they be taking in response to this?
Well, so far, it's unclear as to what measures that they will be taking. So far, they still see it as a retaliatory action, which, like I said, we've seen those patterns since the war in Ukraine broke out. But imminently, there is a discussion happening between President Joe Biden as well as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, ongoing in Washington, where they'll be discussing the supplies of weapons to Ukraine and the escalation of their war. These, of course, weapons will be able to directly be fired into Russia, something that Russia isn't really anticipating and doesn't really want to go ahead. And so the next steps that are taken will be very crucial in what Russia does next, as well as how the British government go about it, considering it is still a move of soft power so far. But that's not to say that this can't escalate quickly. We've seen that happen historically over time under the leadership of President Putin, that the war can escalate very quickly. His moves can escalate very quickly, and things can move very fast, especially if he feels as though his country, Russia, is now at war with several other countries that are backing Ukraine.
Are there any concerns about the safety and security of other diplomats in Russia and Ukraine as well?
Well, this is not the first time that diplomats have been expelled. When the war initially broke out, both parties terminated the existence of diplomats in both of their countries. And so the safety of the citizens, as well as the diplomats, ambassadors, and so on, have been prioritized. And we've seen that over the last number of years since this war broke out. And so this time around, we're seeing it continue. It's worth adding here that these diplomats that have been expelled left Russia weeks ago. And again, that's why it's been described as a tit-for-tat action, predominantly because it's coming as, Britain is debating whether or not to supply those arms to Ukraine, which, by the way, are a significant amount. There's over $700 million worth of missiles that Britain wants to commit to Ukraine. And so for that reason, of course, Russia is very much jittery, if you like, about whether or not this will go ahead, whether or not this support will be impactful in this war. But one thing is for sure, in answer to your question, is that the protection and the safety of citizens on both sides are, of course, being prioritized, which is why we're seeing the use of these expulsions used as a tactic in this war.
All right, so let's have your take on the implication of this on UK-Russia trade and economic relations, regional security, as well as NATO and Russia relations.
Well, we do know so far that it has taken a toll on regional politics, that's for sure, as well as the economy of Europe as well. We know that when this war broke out, the gas prices soared. I mean, everybody could feel it. Part of the biting cost of living crisis that Europe has been facing for a number of years now was worsened not just by the pandemic, but also by the war in Ukraine. We know that Russia has massive gas pipelines that supply energy to the rest of Europe. And that has been crucial as a weapon in effectively crippling other parts of Europe that are allying with countries like Ukraine, of course, who are heavily involved in this war. We know that that cost has, of course, been passed on to the consumer, and many people have felt the impact of that. Since then, we know that the response to that is that countries like Germany and the UK as well have been trying to find alternative ways to reduce the reliance of gas and energy from Russia. That, of course, is ongoing and is yet to be felt in terms of its economy, in terms of its citizens as well. So for now, the war will still largely impact the economy of Europe and will still largely impact what steps and decisions that Britain will decide to take as this war continues to progress.
With the threat by Vladimir Putin, do you think the UK and the US will still decide to go ahead with supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles as they've been requesting?
Well, the meeting is ongoing, and so it's probably best to watch out for what the details of that meeting would be. My hunch is that it's likely, considering there is also Iranian support towards Russia as well. So both sides have allies that are willing to support, but because of historically how the UK and the US have supported Ukraine, it's been a long time coming because President Zelensky has been clamoring for so long for these weapons to be supplied to his country to essentially end this war. And so for that reason, there's a strong feeling that it could go ahead, but it's one to watch what the outcome of this meeting will be.
All right, thank you so much, Arise correspondent Olarinoye, monitoring events from London. Thank you.